I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the
Lord. To have true authenticity, to speak with your authentic voice, you need to be the master of four things. Conquer these four elements that we're going to look at together. You will not only find your authentic voice, but you will use it to speak with power and persuasion. Number 3, find your passion. Find your passion. Oh, this is so important. Our authentic voice is a passionate voice. When we start to speak with somebody, the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, are we excited? Are we enthusiastic? What do we think about this proposal? Do we really believe in it? If you don't believe what you're saying, how is it that anyone else should? If you're not passionate about what you're talking about, why should anybody else be inspired? Passion is so important. Let's take a closer look at one of the greatest, most passionate, most inspiring speeches ever given in the modern era by one of the greatest, most charismatic, passionate speakers in our history. I want to talk with you about Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, which is probably one of the greatest speeches ever given. Many of you know this from history, but I don't know if many people appreciate that most of this great speech was unplanned or impromptu. In reality, Dr. King abandoned his prepared text, and in a great moment of courage, he embraced his authentic voice and gave a speech that moved a generation. He changed the world and he made history. So let's take a little closer look at what happened on August 28, 1963, in Washington, D.C., during the March on Washington.
Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
It was a massive, peaceful protest by African Americans for civil and economic equality. It was a defining moment in American history. But the defining moment of the protest, the most famous event of that time, was the speech given by Dr. King from the Lincoln Memorial. It's what we call the I Have a Dream speech. It's interesting because if you know the story and you go back and you look at the speech in its entirety, what most people will see was at the very beginning of the speech, there was a very different tone and demeanor with Dr. King. It was almost as though he was struggling a little bit to find his rhythm and his pace. And about 2 minutes or so into the speech, something remarkable happens. He takes a pause, and a woman named Mahalia Jackson, a gospel singer who was sitting very near Dr. King, shouted out, "Tell him about the dream." And evidently, Dr. King heard her because it inspired him. And you can literally see him push his prepared text aside. He changed his strategy in that moment. And with his authentic voice, full of passion, full of resolve, he improvised the remainder of that speech, beginning with the "I have a dream" phrase, one that he repeated some 9 additional times in succession, a phrase that was never really part of the written text, but became a phrase that made history.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
What is the lesson and the legacy of Dr. King for us? Well, there are many lessons, but when it comes to passion and finding our authentic voice, Dr. King reminds us to ask ourselves always a few simple questions before we get up and give our next presentation. Why do I care about this? Why is it important? And why should anybody else care as much as I do? If you don't have good answers to those questions, you don't have passion, and you won't speak in your authentic voice. For Martin Luther King, it was his dream. And the world is better because he had the passion and the courage to share it with us, to share his dream with us. Fourth and final goal, fourth and final challenge to finding and embracing our authentic voice. Inspiration is born